Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following reading, Signs of Spiritual Progress, is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. Swami Kriyananda writes, "One day a brother disciple of mine was asked to dig a deep hole for a septic tank. He dug all day, never stopping to see how far he had come. At the day's end, much to his own and everyone else's surprise, the hole had been finished. That, Master said, is the way to find God. Keep on digging and digging, never worrying how far you have come. Then suddenly, one day, you will find yourself there." Master used often to say, if you plant a seed, then keep digging it up to see how it is doing, it will never be able to grow. You must leave it in the ground and water it daily. Then it will surely grow in its own time. So also with the path to God. Plant the seed of divine aspiration. Don't dig it up constantly to see how it is doing, but water it daily with meditation and with divine actions. See also that you surround it with a protective hedge of good company. In time, your little seed will grow into a mighty tree of self-realization, affording shade and shelter to every passing wayfarer. But remember, if you dig up the seed constantly, you may only succeed in killing it. Doubt is one of the greatest hindrances on the path to God. Yet Master said that doubt also has its constructive aspects. His caution was against indulging in destructive doubts. The Hamlet or fence-sitting complex, for instance. Shall I? Shan't I? Will meditation really help me? Should I try serving in a hospital instead? Or the attitude of self-judgment, which insists on keeping an open mind to every discouraging idea. I'm sure I haven't got what it takes to get anywhere on the path. Maybe I'm practicing the techniques all wrong or going backwards instead of forwards. What if this path is only a snare for the unwary, leading them not to enlightenment but to confusion? How many, alas, how very many devotees I have seen, not only on this, but on every spiritual path, wandering dazedly in a fog of such doubts as these. Master, in referring to such people, sometimes quoted from the Bhagavad Gita, "The doubter is the most miserable of mortals."
This topic, the signs of spiritual progress, is a very popular one throughout our journey on the spiritual path. And I was originally taking it for granted that the signs of spiritual progress would be interesting, because it so often is interesting to yogis. But I did have to step back and first ask myself, now why, when speaking of signs of spiritual progress, did Swamiji begin by talking about doubt? And I didn't see the connection at first, and then I realized on one level, we are looking for signs of spiritual progress. We may be looking for signs of spiritual progress because we're doubting. I want to see that I have progressed because secretly I doubt whether I have or not. And I want some proof that I have, or I worry. And it often comes up, I don't think I've progressed very much because, and then fill in the blank. We've had this experience very often in the level 1 class, where people will say, or actually the level 2 class where we meet them successively, I've been meditating now for 4 weeks, nothing has happened. No angels, no devas, no light, no sound, no levitation. I don't even like doing it. And then plus nothing has changed in me. Do you feel any different? No. Do you notice any difference in your behavior? No. Okay. Does your family notice any difference? Yeah. Yeah, in fact, this one woman I remember, her husband said, well, you're calmer now. And her child said, Mommy, you're nicer now. And we see the same with everybody, that even if we don't see the difference, those close to us, who know us well and are kindly disposed, notice changes. Sometimes, of course, as I've mentioned, the changes are undesirable, like, wow, you've become boring. No more Star TV. No more going out to this Nungambakam on Friday nights. And come on, you're just sitting at home in the puja room. But we say, yeah, but that's where the real excitement is. That's where the real joy is. And these other things are fine too, especially if we enjoy them with the joy of God. But still, our life starts to become simpler. It starts to become less cluttered. As Swamiji was saying in the reading on even-mindedness, it's a tendency to want to leap after the next fulfillment, the next excitement. And then when something unhappy happens, then try to quickly leap to something happy again, if only to numb that sadness. But we start to want to really know what is true. And then when we get onto the spiritual path, it becomes immediate. Okay, how am I doing? It's a natural question. It's not a bad question at all. But there's also a lot of misconceptions about the signs of spiritual progress, especially when you're new and unsure. And again, in a sense, we're all new because we're not yet saints. And on the other hand, we're all very, very old on the spiritual path. And how can I make such a claim if we've just been meditating a few months, say? First of all, being born in India and being interested in these things, both of those are required, means you're probably an old soul, because the saints, I think, probably have a monopoly on births in India. They sort of get to jump to the head of the queue and say, oh no, sorry, I was a yogi for 400 lifetimes before you. And they get to go down to India. Because the land supports all of that. At the same time, there are many people, Americans and so on, born into Indian bodies here, very materially minded. And I don't say that with criticism. When Swamiji met Abdul Kalam, the president of India, some years ago, Abdul Kalam said, do you like that you came in 1960? Do you like the changes you've seen since then? And Swamiji said, when I came in the late 50s and 60s, I met many, many saints. Anandamoy Ma, Narayan Swami, Satya Sai Baba, and others. And he said, now I haven't met any. And he said, India is going through a materialistic stage. And he said, but it's necessary to bring balance. The country needs infrastructure. It needs general accessibility to education, health facilities. All these things are necessary to balance. But he said India can never leave her spirituality, ever. Because it's a common question. In fact, I was speaking to a neighbor recently who was suffering a bit from this kind of negative doubt. Swamiji mentions in the reading Dharmini read about negative doubt versus positive or constructive doubt. See, constructive doubt says, I want to know the truth. I know there's an answer. I'm just trying to find it. I'm not sure if I have the whole picture yet. But I know that God is the truth. I know that I can perceive the truth if I will just clarify the mirror of my understanding. And so that is saying, no, this isn't the full truth, this isn't the full truth. Where is that full truth? Knowing that it's there. Destructive doubt says, there is no truth, actually. Or, I could never know it, flawed and miserable as I am, and so on. Or, you could never know it, no one can ever know it. And so, that negative downturn, anytime a positive thought comes up, you know what, yeah, but on the other hand, that kind of thought. I mean, if other people do it, it's sad. We don't have to worry about if they do it even to us. Because as Swami writes of doubt, should we be worried? Because Jesus said, for example, don't cast your pearls before swine. And Krishna said, you should not reveal these teachings to the doubter or to the ignorant and disturb their understanding or the lack of understanding. And at first it seems like, well, that's pretty mean. How will anyone learn if you don't reveal it to him? But he's saying, don't bother people who aren't interested. And we might think, well, that's polite. I mean, you're not interested, so I won't bother you with the deep truths of life, fine. But it's not that. It's not just out of courtesy that we don't disturb their ignorance. It's because if you share something that's true and good for someone too soon, then it actually can do them harm. Not because they'll be meditating in the wrong way and suddenly turn their spines inside out or something like that. Nothing like that. But because if they're not interested, if they don't want it, if they try it, don't like it, aren't ready, and reject it, then later, when actually it is the right time for them to meditate, and someone says, well, why don't you meditate? You know what, I tried that already, it doesn't work. You see, it builds, instead of a neutral impression, it builds up a negative impression. Now, we don't have to worry too much, oh my God, did I say the right thing? I mean, we have to just be centered in the flow. But ask before saying something, is this coming from this person's need to hear it, or my need to say it? And if it's the latter, then better just go into the other room and then say it out loud to the wall. So you can have your fun, but then leave the other person undisturbed. So, but again, sometimes we get tested. Swamiji said, is Jesus also saying, the full quote is, don't cast your pearls before swine, meaning, of course, pigs, lest they trample them and turn about and rend you, meaning cut you. Not just that they won't like it, but they'll actually charge at you. And we've probably had this experience too. That saying, listen, why don't you meditate? Oh my God, this navel gazing and so on. If meditation is so great, why is India suffering? All these reasons we get. Or, why are you wasting your life in this? At least earn some money. All these things come. And that's why I say, to be spiritual, I have a sense you're spiritual because you're born in India and interested in these things. Both requirements are there, needed to be fulfilled. So, Swami says, is Jesus and Krishna both saying, don't say these truths because if a doubter hears them and attacks you, it's harmful to you. And that we don't want the devotees to be challenged by doubters, questioners, critics, and so on. And Swamiji said, no, of course not. It's good for us to go through these tests. And I hope so, because it's so common that we do. It's another reason why devotees in the beginning tend to be quiet about what they're doing. Either you see the desire to share it with everyone. That was my first experience. When I was in college, we were trying to find the meaning of life, and it's such a relevant thing to search for when you're in college, and we've got to understand what makes people tick, and why do I want this, and all of this psychoanalysis and exploration and all these things. And I read this book, The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand. I thought, fantastic, excellent. I want to be a sincere, truthful person and not one of these fake, as she called it, second-handers. Those people who just give everything second-hand. They have no original thoughts of their own. And so I mentioned it to a cousin of mine. I said, I have finished reading The Fountainhead. You know the book, of course. And he said, yeah, let's see, isn't that by Ayn Rand? And I said, yes. And he said, I think that's one of those books that when I read when I was younger and I loved it, and if I were to read it now, it would make me sick. And I thought, my scripture was being insulted. And he obviously didn't grasp the full depth. But it's because the philosophy is too narrow. And I didn't see that at the time. It took more life experience to realize how narrow and artificial it was. There's no heart in it. There was no patience with anyone else. There was no desire to help someone along in their understanding. It was just be true to yourself and the truth as you define it. Not even as it is. That's another big difference between, I won't say America and India, though I was tempted to, and between the ego and the soul. The soul says truth is, it's my job to perceive it. America says this too, and I say, meaning by the Western logic. Science, for example, there is a truth that we are discovering. We are not creating and inventing. And spiritually, of course, there is also a truth. That's why Yama Niyama is outlined. Because it's saying these are the true laws of your own nature. And you should follow them so that you can be happy. Not because Patanjali said so. Not because the different, scriptures and priests and anyone will say do this or else. It's because you'll benefit. Master said the 10 Commandments is such an unpleasant name because it's just do this, I command thee, or else. And he said they should be retitled The 10 Rules for Eternal Happiness. And so this is what my neighbor was saying. He was kind of going through some of this negative doubt, and he kept, for example, he said the younger generation, they have no interest in any of our traditions and historical rites and all this. They're just throwing it all to the wind. Which, is funny because every older generation says that about the younger generation. Which means when he was a kid, that's what his grandparents were saying about him. I remember people were complaining about in America sometimes, people will complain about how English is degrading, and people, especially in emails and so on, aren't capitalizing and so on, and not writing in full sentences, and it's just all, not even knowing how to spell, because if you don't know how to spell, you just type it into the computer and the red line appears, and you right click and then you know how to spell. And so I found this article about how pathetic English has become, and how the youngsters these days are just having complete disregard for proper form. And the article was written in 1980. And so now writing about the people in 2000 who are now grown up complaining about this. So anyway, there's often this divide. So he said they're disregarding our traditions. And I said, well, I think also though there is an eagerness to find what is true. I do see among the younger generation a desire to say, I want to know what is true myself. I don't want to be told. I don't want to hear about it. I want to experience it. I want to find out what is true. And he said, do you think they're finding truth? I said, well, at least they're looking for it. Do you think everyone is looking for it? No, of course not everyone is looking for it. I said, but I think they'll find it. If you want to know what is true, that is your safest guide. Because then if you're wrong, you'll slowly discover, okay, that wasn't right. This is, again, constructive doubt leading you to the truth. And then he also said, well, I think they rebel against this thought, do yama niyama, because. He said, I think the rishis of old didn't care to take the time to explain themselves, do it because it's good for you. They just said, do it, and that was enough. And I said, yeah, these things have to be tested and have to be experienced and so on. And we went back and forth, and I kind of got him from, yes, but it's no good, and on the other hand, it's no good, kind of to neutral. Like, okay, maybe it's all right. But I have to admit, at the end of the discussion, he said, well, but God is great. And it was so sweet. And then I shared Anandamoy Ma's quote, he who made this world, don't you think he knows how to take care of it? Lest we get too concerned about anything. We have to care. We have to have compassion, but we have to also know the limits of our responsibility. There's a saying in India, Master quoted often, anyone who loves you more than your own mother is a witch. And the implication meaning your mother, especially Divine Mother, knows what's best for you. And someone who tries to, sugarcoat that or take that away is not wishing you well. There was a woman in Ananda village in the early years who was working very hard. She served constantly. 7 days a week she worked. And she also was in the office, first to arrive, last to leave, and set a precedent, actually, for the others who in that time thought, well, I'll come to office when I like, and because after all, it's all just God's dream. And so they would come in and she would welcome. Looking at the clock and so on. And it helped build a spirit, because she was saying, why not take this seriously? You read Sri Yukteswar's words in the Autobiography of a Yogi, and you better stick to it because of the gain you'll receive and so on. So anyway, this woman was working really hard. And then her boss decided, she needs a day off. And so the woman is Seva, for those of you who know her. So the boss said, Seva, you take tomorrow off. And so that next day, Swamiji called Seva and said, Seva, I need help with this. I need you to come, either into the office or whatever and do it. And so the boss came in, saw Seva there and said, what happened? And she said, well, Swamiji asked me to come in. And the boss said, oh, no, I had given you the day off. He must not know. So the boss called Swami and said, Swamiji, I gave Seva the day off. And so she doesn't need to work today. And Swamiji said, I know what's best for Seva. And he did. He and Seva, I think, even admitted later that being at the office was helping her a lot. Why? Because sometimes when we serve, I don't know if this was the case with her, it gets us out of our heads. It gets us actually away from doubt. It's one good cure for doubt and for worrying about how we're doing, is just to serve. Only because then we don't really think about ourselves. We were at Tatvaloka yesterday planning out some of the arrangements for the evening. And at one point someone was expressing, well, what if we do all this and too many people come, which is a nice problem. And then someone said, what if we do all this and then no one comes, or only one person comes from thousands of flyers and so on. And we talked about how, but if that one person, is Rajesh or Karthik or any of us, we all were one person who just came from one thing, then it's worth it. And not because now you have a core devotee, but because one person is touched. It's meaningful. And plus, Dharmini was pointing out how we put out all this energy, it's never lost. There's a line from a song that Swamiji wrote where he said, every effort we spend gives more life in the end, till our gladness and life's ever new. Every effort we spend gives more life. It puts out light and positive vibration. And also, and most of all, it is what we become through the serving. In fact, sometimes we have to make up occasions just to serve. I mean, literally, like, let's have a thing so we can all do something together. And so we were having this discussion, and then Archana pointed out about all of this. She said, and it's fun also. And it's true. So many people were relating how standing there handing out flyers at the Sabha was fun for them because they were also spending time with each other and talking about different things and also putting energy out together and finding out different ones saying, oh yes, I got it last night, and oh yes, I got it at the other place where you were handing it out. Oh, I saw the ad in the newspaper, all these little things. We say, oh good, thank God. But coming back to the signs of spiritual progress, there's the classic story of Chaitanya and his disciples, which we've heard many times, but it's worth repeating. That the different Chaitanya, sometimes gurus get in this sort of mood where they sort of speak more directly about the devotees. And so the different disciples were saying, when will I find God? And so he was telling one, for you it will be 2 lifetimes, and for you it will be just one more lifetime, for you it'll be 3 lifetimes. And some of them were 3 lifetimes, and we can relate. I mean, LKG, 3 more times, and so on. And then his most advanced devotee, finally, I don't know if he asked or if it was just sort of obvious because he was sitting, the one who was closest to him and always with him, and he said, and you won't find God for 1,000,000 lifetimes. No, what he said is, it'll take you 1,000,000 lifetimes to find God. And so the others were just, oh my God, I mean 3, I'll take 3, thanks. And so it just kind of, no one else dared ask anything after that. And so a little later, they noticed this same devotee was outside dancing, just in ecstasy. And they said, maybe he's just snapped or something. And so they went out, they said, what are you doing? He said, come rejoice with me. And he said, didn't you hear what the master said? He said, yes, didn't you hear him? He promised I would find God. And then Chaitanya came out and said, I only said that to show the rest of you what a real devotee is made of. And then he touched him and he found God right then. And we have to think, why? How could it be that way? Because I had to say, okay, it's fine, but I do want to find God, and I do want it to be in this lifetime. So how do you cross that bridge from, I want to find God, to, it doesn't matter when I find Him? Because, it does matter. When our hunger is strong enough, it does matter. If someone says, dinner is delayed by 10 minutes, we go, fine, okay. And if they say dinner is delayed by 2 hours, say, unacceptable. Ipo venam. I want it now. And why? Because we're hungry and we can't bear that emptiness. And when we feel that way for God, then it matters very much, even a 10-minute delay or a 2-hour delay and so on. And I should make this point out too, signs of spiritual progress, the danger of this topic too, in going over it in our minds, is that it often can be, how spiritually progressed am I? How am I doing? How much advanced have I become? You see the danger? There's too much I. It's about how shiny the ego is, instead of how close am I to God. You see the difference there? What's the point of being spiritually progressed, advanced? One person said to me, now I know this one is this much advanced, and that one is that much advanced, and this one is very advanced. I said, how do you know? He said, well, because very centered, very calm, very, has all these kinds of visions and so on. And actually, the centered and calm, I'm reminded, I invented that. He just said, oh, all these visions, and he has long hair. Okay, well, that makes him spiritually advanced. How do you know? And he said, well, I don't really know. And it wasn't so much that the person he was speaking of was or wasn't. It was, how can we know? How can we know how advanced someone else is? What to speak of, how can we know how advanced we are? We don't know. There was a disciple who came to the master asking for diksha, and the master said, no, you're not ready. Go and get the firewood. Go to the river, get some firewood, bring it back. So the disciple did that, and they said, okay, how about now? No. You stay with us, but you're not ready. The next morning, okay, have some initiation. Can I? No. Go get the firewood. So this became a pattern, and meanwhile other visitors are coming in. Hello, Guruji, can I have initiation? Yes, you may have initiation. And this one's watching going, okay, well, getting the firewood and so on. And then finally, one day, after this is going on for a while, he's going to the river getting the firewood. He looks in the river, happens to see himself, and sees that all his hair has become white, his whole face is wrinkled, and his eyes have even become a little faded. He realized, years have gone by. I'm so old. All my life is gone, and all I've been doing is getting this firewood. I've never been even worthy enough to receive initiation from the master. What has this life even been for? I was hoping to get initiation when I was young and spend my time in development. I haven't even been able to begin. And so he started to cry. And as the tear trickled down his cheek and left it, suddenly his guru was at his side and caught the tear. And he said, what are you doing? He said, if a tear from a saint such as yourself were to hit this ground, there would be famine here for 10 years. And so there's many points to that story, but one of them is we don't know how advanced we are. And that doesn't mean, I don't know how advanced I am, so it must be good. I don't know how advanced I am, but I have an idea. No, it's not like that. I mean this when we're feeling self-critical. That's the time to say, you know what, I don't know how advanced I am. Because advanced can mean I'm more advanced than you. What good is that? I'm more advanced than I used to be. That's better. That's encouraging. But more, God, I feel closer to you. Even Master expressed this after having samadhi to his guru, saying, Master, when will I have God? And Sri Yukteswar said, you have him already. And Master said, I don't think so, sir. And Sri Yukteswar said, well, I see from your question that you're thinking that having God means manifesting outward powers. He said, but you can know your closeness to God by how much joy you feel in your heart. And Master said, well, I certainly feel that joy. And that's how we can we can be okay. How that disciple of Chaitanya's can be okay with, it's going to take me 1,000,000 lifetimes to find God, because I'm so blissful now. And so if I'm going to feel this blissful for 1,000,000 more lifetimes, what does it matter? I'm so in love with God now, and I'm deepening this relationship. And it's ever new, as Master was saying, ever new joy, not just joy, as Swamiji would sometimes joke, just like, oh God, here it is again, joy, more joy, every day joy. It's not like that. It's ever new joy, different kinds of sweet experiences, and so on. So that is how we can stop worrying about, as the disciple digging the hole, how far we've come. But we're just in love with God in this moment and calling to God. And then we find changes in our understanding. I wanted to mention this part involved too, because Kriya, for example, sometimes comes up. We've been doing a level 4 class, and in this, which is preparation for Kriya initiation. And in this class, we have to spend a lot of time focusing on technique. And do this technique and do that technique, and it becomes very technical. And there's a reason. It's because Kriya itself, when you receive it, has a lot of pieces. And if you haven't been prepared, it's a lot to be hit with all at once. So Swamiji created this course to kind of give you a taste of some of the details ahead of time. So when you receive the initiation, the leap is only this much instead of this much that you're used to doing. But it starts to pinch the heart a little bit because it seems so much about technique. Where's the devotion? In fact, this is the criticism that sometimes people will make of Kriya or yoga in general, yoga practice, saying that devotion is enough. And it's true. Devotion is enough. It's absolutely true. Again, as Draupadi said to Krishna, when Krishna said, "Why don't you practice yoga?" She said, "I want to, but I can't stop thinking of you long enough to try." You can get there through devotion only, but the challenge is that most of us, when we have an intense experience of devotion, can't maintain it for too long. And also can't necessarily summon it. It comes and it goes. Sometimes the heart is so full of devotion, we see a leaf and want to weep because of how beautiful it is. Other times we see all the leaves in the world and we're just mad about how they're clogging up the road and in the way. And we could see some devotee, even as Master was listening to some devotees chanting, but they were doing it with loud cymbals and drums and at full volume, and it was just grating. And he thought just how undevotionally they are chanting the Lord's name. And suddenly Master Mahashaya appeared to him and said, "Isn't it true, little sir, that the Lord's name sounds sweet, chant from all lips, ignorant or wise?" And so he realized that. Of course it's beautiful. At least they're chanting God's name. I mean, they could be chanting something else. So keeping that in mind, I was thinking Kriya helps the bhakti yogi to be even to maintain their devotion and deepen it. It helps the karma yogi to take all that energy to do and put it into the most central action we can do. Kriya, after all, means action only, a specific action for liberation. It helps the jnana yogi clarify his or her perception of truth. Because just wanting to know jnana doesn't mean we get to know jnana. The constant thing is, do I have the whole picture clearly? And Kriya helps with that too. And so on. But Swamiji points out the danger of the Raja Yogi is to, in all these blessings and all these powers that start to come, to take the credit to ourselves and say, I am now advanced, and so on. And so the thought I want to leave you with is just to love God more. And I'm not saying you're not loving God enough. I'm sure you are, but it's not enough until we are one with Him. It's not enough for any of us. Then it becomes too much. As Sister Gyanamata said as she was exiting the body, she said, too much joy. Too much joy. And she said it, I think, more in the Indian way of saying it. Too much is a good thing, actually. When I would say, Swamiji's event, there was too much of crowd. I'd be like, oh, really? Oh, I'm sorry about that. No, it's a good thing. It means we would say there was so much of a crowd. And so a little adjustment has to be made there, mentally. But in terms of this also, I was so grateful that we chanted this chant, oh, life is sweet and death a dream, because there was a devotee who, Swamiji would often fly from India or Italy to America, and there would be the day that his plane would land, and it almost always landed in San Francisco, which is near to the Palo Alto community. So he would land there, and people would gather at the airport to receive him, and so on. And there was a devotee who couldn't go to the airport to meet him, and was feeling really badly because, after all, Swamiji's arriving, there's a chance to even just greet him, or put it another way if you want to get morbid, that Swamiji is in San Francisco and I am just, checking my email when I could be over there, and so on. So this devotee wrote to Swamiji saying, I can't actually come to the airport, and I'm feeling really badly about it, and yet I know you wouldn't want me to feel badly, and I know that I'm with you in spirit and so on, but still my heart feels badly, but I know that, that I'm with you inside, and that I'm trying to feel that connection inside, and so on. And Swamiji wrote back to this person saying, thank you for your beautiful words. It is, he said, oh, joy is sweet and sorrow a dream when thy song flows through me. And he said, it's all God's love. And then, as it reminds me of when Master said to the monks who were helping him with his body, because he was going through a particular karmic test at that point, and it was hard for him to walk, so they were actually carrying him up some stairs. And he said, you are all so kind to me with your many attentions. And they said, oh, sir, it is you who are kind to us, helping us in all these ways. And he said, God is loving God. He said, that's his drama. And he later said to them at another occasion, he said, carry my body and I'll carry your souls. So, God bless you.
Is where we have the spiritual experiences. And we think, oh, my meditation didn't go well because we didn't feel joy or bliss during meditation. But really what happens is meditation is that time of communion, and we can't judge it because we don't really know what's going on while we meditate. We're in the other side of our brains. The cognitive part is not working. So we don't really know what's going on. We may be aware of those thoughts, but we're not aware of the true depth that we're experiencing with our astral bodies and our astral spines. And the newer we are to meditation, the less we are aware of what's actually happening. But over time, especially through Kriya, you become more aware and sensitive to what is going on. But you really don't want to analyze it anyway. So we think it's during that meditation time that we experience the bliss, but it's not. The bliss comes even when you're not in meditation. The bliss can come when you're at your computer and you suddenly have a thought of God and you're overwhelmed with just communion and in that moment. So just know your willingness and openness to connect to God, whether you're in front of a computer or in a meeting or acting on stage or whatever you're doing, that God can be right there with you. And when you're sick also, it's very common to think, oh, I'm sick, then my body won't. Swamiji was sick constantly, working out karma in his body, karma of a lot of us, probably even those who didn't know him yet. He had bliss during cancer surgery. He had bliss before, during, and after cancer surgery. He wasn't meditating at the time. He just had bliss at that time. So just know that when you keep your mind focused on God throughout the day, you can have those bliss experiences even though it's not in meditation. But if you make sure you meditate regularly, then you are putting money into the meditation bank. You're putting money, bliss money, into the meditation bank. And that's why regular meditation and long meditation is so important, because that is ensuring that you will have those bliss moments throughout the day. If you don't put that money in the bliss bank, then your well dries up, kind of like the Chennai water these days. So just remember that regular meditation will fill it up, and you never know when that bliss will come. And it can just be the smallest thing. And what Master is writing about, what Swamiji is writing about is so true. You know, and when Master said it's God enjoying God, Swamiji felt this way moment to moment. He would be in a crowd of people, he would be communing and feeling truly God's joy in everybody else. He would feel that, and he would experience that himself. So all these things we talk about, it's easy to get in the mind and think, yes, this happens and that happens and this happens. But just know, just contemplate these things, that they really happen, that they really are possible, even if you're a newer meditator in this life, because we don't know how long we've been meditating in other lives. You know, and this devotee who was carrying the wood obviously had diksha in a past life, didn't need diksha in this life. And so the Guru said, no, no, no. And yet, he had the diksha. So, you know, we just don't know. But just know that you can experience it, and don't just expect it in meditation. Expect it through your daily life. When you're working, it comes. Sometimes it's difficult because you can't function as well. But it still comes, and you can pray to function during that bliss. So just want it, know it comes, and take advantage of it.